Hello and welcome to A Line and Mirth podcast. My name is Mirta and I am your host. This podcast is a place where I share my experiences and knowledge of spirituality and personal growth. I'm an energy practitioner, intuitive diviner, and medium, and I look forward to walking this journey with you. Hello, my home slices. How are you guys? It is really bright and early today, Monday. And I tend to wake up super early on Mondays, or I'm trying my best to do so. Because going back into maternity, going back to work from maternity leave, and then, Monday is the start of the week. Just putting out my offerings and setting my intentions at my ancestral altar and just getting myself together before craziness begins in my house. So if you guys find that my voice sounds a little raspy, is because my body is still trying to wake up. But I wanted today's episode to be since we're still in Cancer season, not for very much longer, but we're in Cancer season. Cancer is the mama of the zodiac. And yesterday I attended the mother wound healing with Jay, which I'm also going to tell you guys, she is amazing. She is Dominican. She's spiritual. She's a curandera. And she also provides energy healing. Jay was my doula from the very beginning of my pregnancy, and she provided me so much support emotionally and spiritually and even physically, right? Because she gave me exercises to do and things to do while I was pregnant, and even throughout my labor. So I'm extremely grateful for her. And I attended her womb healing circle yesterday. Now I'm sorry, Jay is crowned.emerald on Instagram. I'll try to remember to link it in the notes so that then you guys can find her and search for her. She does ancestral and money wound healing. So yesterday, attending this healing circle with other Latinas was very, very nice for my soul. And I said it in the circle as well, because us as Latina women, we sort of think that we are the only ones that are experiencing such situations, and it's not until we come together, which I hope that there is more of that. I'm all for community coming together and healing together, discussing topics. It's not until we come together that we realize that we're all coming from the same spaces. We're all experiencing the same things, granted at different levels and from different variety of backgrounds, pero it's still mostly the same, right? And when we come together, the goal is to heal, to bring awareness to what had occurred, and how to basically transcend the feeling and sort of commune with it. That is the main goal when I, at least for me, when I want to join a circle, or I even assist or do my Reiki and meditation circles. That is the goal. So right, giving just some background as to mother wounds. For some, it may be like the emotional connection that you didn't have with your mother, or the physical aspect or physical abuse that you may have experienced from a mom, the neglect, again, whether that was emotional or physically not being there. It can be like a whole slew of things, right? And I do want to say, because this is something that I have learned throughout the journey, right? Just because I go and say that my mother wounds are more on the emotional side, that does not mean that yours, or you should see yours as any less valid, or let's say that if somebody starts speaking to you about how they experienced physical abuse and you didn't, that yours are less valid. Because that was something for me. I always tried, if I heard or saw that someone had like an experience that was much bigger than what I experienced, that caused more trauma than what I believed, then I was trying to sort of minimize the experience that I had. And that was just more sort of like still suppressing it, like, oh, mine wasn't that bad, like I need to get the fuck over it. But no, please know that every experience, every feeling that you have is valid, and it should not be compared to like what someone else experienced, and vice versa, right? Like, just because you experienced something that you believe was traumatic, was very hard for you, does not mean that you basically get to dictate the experience that somebody else had by saying like, oh, mine was worse, so get over it. So we just have to basically be gentle with ourselves and be gentle with others. But going back, my mother wounds basically stem and stay, and I'm still processing a lot and still moving through a lot of the emotional, right? So yes, physically my mother was there, both of my parents were, right? Stayed together forcefully in a marriage. And now I'm 33, so my mom always says it's a year older, so they have been together, or well, not physically now, pero been together for 35 years. And yes, a lot of the stuff that basically occurred was more of the own parenting and teachings that she had while growing up. And being a child of immigrants, we can all relate that a lot of our parents had to basically do the whole transition into the US, or even trying to find their own space within their home country. So my mother always told me that she was the black sheep of the family, and that her own mother was occupied with 7 or 8 kids at a time. I believe that she is the youngest. My mother is the youngest or the second youngest. And basically she had to work at a very young age. Then she didn't want to work the family farm anymore, so she decided to leave her house and go live in the city. So now back then women were not, like, quote unquote allowed to leave their home up until they got married. She decided to just leave based on her own cojones, as she says it. And then, she was looked down or frowned upon because she had left, worked as a nanny for a more privileged family in the city of the Dominican Republic, which is Santo Domingo. And she had traveled back into her family, to see her mom and whatnot, and then go back and used to live at the family's more privileged family house, and she liked the livelihood. She said she wasn't going back, whatever. Long story short, that's where she met my dad and then conceived me. So being that she didn't get the emotional support, didn't know how to how to receive that from her own family, from her own mother, that sort of bleeded off to her now being a mother and basically showing those same teachings. I do know, and I do understand the fact that being now very strong women, both my grandmother and my mother, strong in literally every sense of the word, they had to continue being that way because of all the adversities that they had. Now, my grandmother had several children. Her husband had to work the farm. She had to feed all these kids. There wasn't a way of let me give this child more attention, or let me be here emotionally and physically and mentally for each and every one of these 8 kids. Now, I don't know how they did it back then, but me and this blended family with my husband, we have 4. We now have 4. It's half of what my grandmother basically dealt with, and I don't know how she did it. So I can sort of también put myself in that position, and it's it's hard, yes. And I'm in no way, shape, or form, now, in the phase that I am in, I can sort of understand where that comes in, that humanness of not truly being able to be there para todo, for everything. So my mother then, coming into the US, not knowing the language, I would have to say, let's see, she was probably in her 30s coming here. Probably in her 30s. I don't know the correct math, pero she was young. No, she wasn't 30. She had me at 30. No, it was mid 30s, guys. So coming here, not knowing the language, having to basically sleep in a living room because my aunt had offered them a space in her living room until they got basically stabilized to get their own apartment, and then bringing me to the United States. And now we begin the hustle culture of having to wake up early, go to work, not having the time to make lunches or take kids to school or pick up kids from school. It's a whole different dynamic for her. And then having to deal with 2 kids, because it was myself and my sister, having to deal with 2 kids, and her trying to stabilize herself, being the independent woman that she is, although she was still with my father. So she was physically there, Now, on an emotional aspect, growing up, there wasn't that connection. Yes, there is emotion of like, I am her daughter, she is my mother, so basically she does have to, like, you know, qué sé yo, like, there is that little connection, like, yes, you're my daughter, and that's it. But connection like how I would say that I have with my oldest son, it wasn't that, right? There were things that would occur and I wouldn't even dare to tell her, because there wasn't no way of her consoling me when things would be going on, because she was too busy. She had something to do. She had to make dinner, she had to clean the house, she had to go to an appointment. How dare I say that I am going through something when she is going through something much worse? And there it just wasn't there. So going back to this mother wound healing circle that happened yesterday, I can see how that emotional neglect, which also comes into like how it shows up on the body, right? So I work a lot with the energy centers in the body, and your energy centers develop as you age. Like that, well, not develop as you age, more of like there's energetic imprints that happen in these centers as you age. So the first chakra, the root chakra of security, and the sacral chakra of your womb, and the solar plexus chakra, those are the physical chakras that we basically tend to develop in the early years. And not feeling physically secure in your own home or in your environment, not feeling sort of confident, not feeling that you are in power over yourself, that starts creating those blockages in those energy centers. And I do see how my development throughout my younger years, how that started building blockages. Okay, I can't speak to my mother about this, or I can't get some type of security from my mother because of this, or why should I even discuss this with my mother? And that showing up in my body energetically, and then as I aged, showing up physically with the I would have to say with the menstruation, in the womb, and confidence, and how the lack or the inability to basically speak up for myself when I'm feeling something, because that all started way back when, right? So now, becoming a mother myself, I do tend to casi mente almost be a little anal with how I basically come out as a parent, right? So again, our kids vary in different ages. My son is 17. My husband's daughter, she is, oye, wow, I said 17. Adriel is 16, you guys. He's 16. Then my husband's daughter, she's 15. Then our small one, she's 8. And now we have the newborn, who is 4 months old. So on an emotional level, they all need different things. And I tend to do, or try to do, my best with meeting them at that emotional level. So just last night, the younger one was trying to fight her bedtime, and she made up so many different things, started crying. And yes, this would sound frustrating because it's like, you know the deal, girl. You know what you need to do. Like, just go to sleep. But then if you start thinking about it, it's like, okay, this is a person who is 8 years old. Okay, this is a person that does not have the same mental capabilities as an adult and doesn't know the responsibilities of it. So approaching it was like, what do you need from me right now? And that's what I have sort of learned, right? Because you don't know what your child needs unless you ask them. And you can't go sort of ignoring something that they may need because it's not necessarily what you need, right? So I tend to ask the question of, what do you need from me right now? And she's like, right now? I'm like, yes, right now. She's like, I need a hug. And I'm like, okay. And I gave her the hug. And then I told her, wash your face, brush your teeth, take 3 deep breaths, and get to bed. And she's like, okay. So it's basically, I have learned that I do have to take a deep breath, take a step back, and emotionally meet my kids where they need me to meet them. Not sort of bypass it because I emotionally need more than them. So that's one thing that I have definitely learned with my oldest. With Adriel, it's definitely different, right? He's now going to be a junior in high school. And emotionally is more about the self-confidence. So I have to, talk to him, and it's like, oh, so how do you feel about this? Like, have conversations so that he can understand that it is okay to talk to me regarding things that are outside of the how was your grades? How are your grades? Yes, we have high standards for grades, but then also my husband and I would say we do a really good job with tending to the kids and showing them together as a whole unit. We're one, but then individually they have their own personality, and we have to, in a sense, cater, right? Because we don't want our kids to feel like, oh, you're paying more attention to this person than to that. So that is what we have learned. Now, we're not perfect. I can definitely say I am not perfect. Like, I can legit go off the rails and go off, right? Pero I say I have the grace. I take the accountability for shit that happens. I do apologize to my kids when I am wrong, whether that is, like, I said the name of a freaking cereal that was wrong, or when, I react in a way it's like unexpected, right? Oh, one thing that popped up, remember, I don't know if you guys ever had the experience where your mother would tell you, take the chicken out of the freezer so that then by the time that your mother gets home, she's able to make dinner. So let me tell you a story. Adriel was a very much younger age. I can't remember quite what age this was, but I had told him to take the chicken out of the freezer. And I got home and the chicken was still in the freezer. And I got so upset. I was livid. I was like, basically, I call it like I was acting just like my mother. And this was a shift. This was what shifted for me. I was so upset. I told him, you're not going to have dinner. You're going to have cereal for dinner. So make yourself a bowl of cereal and that's going to be your dinner. I was so upset, and I literally had to come to my senses and had to talk to myself like if I am somebody that's much older and obviously much wiser, and basically tell myself, like, how dare I put adult responsibility on my kid, right? Because that's where it all begins. How dare I? Yes, he can go and help me by taking the chicken out the freezer, but this is a kid, and kids all are distracted, and he had done it before where he would take the chicken out, right? So it's not that he was constantly doing this of like forgetting to take the chicken out the freezer. I don't know, he was excited over something and he completely forgot to take the chicken out the freezer. And I completely did not acknowledge what he was excited about. It was something that he did in school. And I instead paid attention to the fact that he didn't take the chicken out the freezer. And for me, at that point, I was like, wow. And you're definitely healing parenting wounds as you become a parent yourself. And it sucks. Pero I'm like, why am I imposing such a thing on a child? Now, he was probably like in 4th or 5th grade. Why am I imposing the responsibility of like, oh, my mother didn't make dinner because of me? I wasn't able to take the chicken out the freezer. Oh, I have to, skip dinner or have cereal for dinner because I didn't help her. That's not his fucking responsibility. And I had to take accountability for that. And I'm like, that was my responsibility. Like, it's my responsibility to provide and, for him. He doesn't have to go and, leave aside whatever he's excited about or not live his life as a kid because he has to help or he has to tend to things that I have to do. Now, yes, all my kids do help me. Everybody has their fair share in this household. Everybody got shit to do. Everybody got chores. Pero in that moment, it was unfair for me to get upset and speak to him in the way that I spoke to him and tell him that because he didn't take the chicken out the freezer, we're not going to have dinner. And I had to, I did go back into my inner child and relate to that. Like, I didn't like it when, my mom would get home freaking tired and upset, and it's like you can't have a conversation with her because everything that comes out of her mouth is like passive aggressive. Like, it's not my kid's responsibility. I needed to grab my own freaking self together and realize what was going on. Like, what today is going to be me screaming at him because of the chicken, and then next thing you know, I'm gonna be screaming at him for something else. Like, no. I did then apologize, and I did explain to him like the reason as to why I got upset. I needed to make dinner but couldn't make dinner in time for before he went to bed because the chicken was still frozen. He did understand that. And then we discussed what he was excited about, which was that he had won a contest in school for several math problems. And this kid loves math. So then he showed me that, right? And I still remember that shit to this day. And I'm sure that he does too. He does too. Pero we definitely learn how to do things better through the experiences and through the hiccups that we do as parents. Pero we have, and I know that my mother tried to do the best that she could with what she knew. I'm still trying to como understand this day and age as to why it has not changed, but I guess those are just like personality traits that are very hard to move out of when you don't have awareness and accountability. Pero that is like her story to tell, right? The same way with my sister. We had basically the same mother. We lived under the same roof, but we have different experiences as to how we grew up or how we viewed our own household. And that is her own story to go ahead and tell. But another thing that I have learned is that us as parents, right, if we don't have the rule in this household of like, oh, but regardless of whatever this person is, no, we don't force relationships that do not feel healthy in this household. We do not do that. We do tell our kids that they have to give the respect, right? They have to give the respect, but that doesn't mean that you have to como take up or keep up with the stuff that don't feel good for you. If you don't feel good with someone, it shouldn't be forced upon. Like we feel that this is how you nurture the belief of like, someone doesn't make you feel good, but you still have to try and please them. We don't do people pleasing here. The most important thing in our household that we show these kids is like, you respect each other, you respect elders, you respect people outside of this house, right? But you don't take no BS. You don't take it. You do not take it. And I feel like it has been going very well for us. We don't want our kids to have to think back to their younger years and have to see como things like if they were done on purpose. And we try and tell them like, we're trying our best, and give us feedback, because at the end of the day, they are their own person. They, like, our kids are their own person, but they are rules. They are standards that have to be upheld. You're not going to be ignored. You're not going to be dismissed. But if your ass needs to be handed to you, buddy, it's going to get handed to you. And if you need a hug at 10:30 because you're trying to avoid going to sleep, you will get that hug. But then you will also get an understanding as to what is going on and not quickly get dismissed. So I say that has been my experience with mother wound healing, acknowledging my mother's wounds, healing my own wounds, and learning and moving forward as a mama myself. And another thing I want to add, which I feel is so relevant, is like the relationship that you had or have with your mother. does tend to play out in relationships that you have with other women. So I'm speaking to the women here. When it comes to men, it's like the relationship that you have with your mother tends to play out in your relationships with women. So it's important to sort of see how was it that, your mother impacted your life, and sort of taking a note as to how are you holding up relationships, whether they are platonic or romantic, seeing how that is being played out, because it comes out, it definitely shows out. So I invite you to just journal about your experience, seeing how was your upbringing with your mother, or how is the relationship currently with your mother, and if you have kids, like how is that showing up as you are mothering your own children, and how is that relationship sort of showing up with other females within your family, or within acquaintances and that sort of thing. Like, how is that showing up for you? So that is all for me. The time is approaching where the kids are going to start waking up, so I need to start making them some breakfast. But I will leave you with all my love. I love y'all so much. You guys know where to find me. Peace out. Enjoyed this episode? Leave a 5-star rating, and don't forget to follow on Instagram at AlignandMirth. Also, you can book your sessions on the website at www.alignandmirth.com. Until next time, ciao.